welcome to Half the Battle.
In my last review, I said we've never really talked about scrap iron on the show.
Well, let's change that right now.
Meet scrap iron. This figure was released in 1984 with almost all original body parts. Yeah, almost. His arms and lower legs are originally from Airborne, but it isn't really noticeable at all, so I'm not gonna complain about it. I gotta say, the figure looks good, though not great. Don't get me wrong, it's a fine-looking figure, but the sculpts for G.I. Joe didn't really hit their stride until 1985, 1 year later. You can tell by the fact that Scrap Iron has a little less detailing and can only move his head from side to side. This was before the necks became ball-jointed. Also, he looks a bit scrawny. I do really dig the color scheme though, cobra blue and dark red, and I appreciate the molded cobra logo on the helmet.
Though, as we'll find out, it makes little sense.
He comes with some cool accessories, a gun and one you have to assemble. It becomes a very nice double missile launcher. It really is one of the most awesome accessory sets of the era. And that was the only toy poor Scrap Iron got in the original line.
So we'd better take a look at a few that came out later.
We'll start with a figure from 2005 that came in a comic 3-pack, along with Serpentor and Firefly. It's a good-looking figure, and it's quite deceptive actually. The body seemingly looks identical to the original at first glance, but they used parts from the Cobra Trooper and Commander for the arms and legs. Meanwhile, for the longest time I thought they made a new head sculpt for this toy, but it's actually the same one as the original figure. The color scheme makes it look a bit different. I think that's where my confusion came from. As for the color scheme itself, I dig it, though I prefer the darker colors of the original. This one looks more cartoony, which is weird considering he came in a comic pack.
Up next, let's talk about the Scrap Iron that came out in the 2009 Rise of Cobra movie line.
Now, for completeness sake, I have to mention there were two previous figures that used the new body style construction, but since I don't have them, I can't really comment, except to say that this figure reuses parts from them, and for some baffling reason, the visor isn't removable on this version while it was on the other two. Then again, that's probably for the best, since they made his face disfigured on those for some reason. As for the figure itself, well, to be honest, it's kinda boring. Even though I'm a fan of subdued color schemes, this one goes too much overboard with it. He reminds me of those generic police or soldier guys you see show up in a lot of animes.
Hell, generic is the perfect way to describe him.
You could just buy a bunch of these and treat them as regular Cobra troops.
There's one more Scrap Iron I'll talk about from 2005.
Now, most of the toys made for Scrap Iron have used body parts from other figures. There is one exception. The 2005 direct-to-consumer version is the only one that got a brand new body mold.
They really shouldn't have bothered.
And here it is! Holy crap! What, did the Blue Beetle join Cobra or something? This guy looks like a rejected Power Rangers villain, with shoulder pads by way of World of Warcraft. And I haven't even mentioned the weird proportions yet. Leg to torso ratio is way off, and his upper waist is so tiny compared to his lower waist. Hell, he looks like a freaking robot. Yeah, this version is definitely the worst of the bunch, and probably the worst figure from the direct-to-consumer line.
And those were the toys.
The original is my favorite, but only wins out because I like the color scheme just a little bit more than the comic pack version. The worst is, of course, whatever the hell this thing was supposed to be.
That takes us to the character, starting with the file cards.
Scrap Iron is a product designer for Destro's weapons business, Mars.
So he works for Destro, huh? K?
Then why the hell does he have Cobra logos on him? The original has one on his arm and helmet, while the DTC version has them plastered all over him, including a huge one on his chest, which, as an aside, makes for an excellent bullseye to shoot at. To say nothing of the huge logo on his shoulder pad. If he's from Mars, you know what I mean, he shouldn't have any Cobra stuff on him. Anyway, he designs, tests, and even sells weapon systems, especially smart weapons, that are so good they call them brilliant weapons instead.
I assume that's a bomb that can discuss Kierkegaard with you before blowing you up.
His main personality trait, that we never see in the comics or cartoon by the by, is that he's an extreme perfectionist. Imperfection in any form repels him.
Yet another reason why he shouldn't be a freaking Cobra, if you ask me.
All his file cards are basically carbon copies of the first, so they don't add anything.
With one notable exception.
Yep, once again the runt of the litter stands out. In this version, he loves destroying stuff with weapons that go bang. Which is more a trait of Metalhead, not Scrap Iron. Maybe they got the characters confused or something. In the comics, strangely enough, Scrap Iron doesn't show up until issue 43, released in January of 1986, 2 years after his toy came out, and the same year, in fact, they actually discontinued the action figure. As a result, he doesn't get too much exposure, though he did do some important stuff. I don't want to go into spoilers, so let's just say Scrap Iron kills a few important characters, in the issue he debuts in no less. He was only seen a handful of times after that, so I'm sorry to say he didn't get much characterization, and his association with Destro is never played up. In the cartoon, he is introduced in the miniseries The Revenge of Cobra.
He, doesn't do much.
I mean, he shoots a few missiles and handles a flamethrower, but is in no way a major player. After that, he shows up from time to time, like in Cobra Quake, as a bit player. He does, however, get his moment in the spotlight in Arise, Serpentor, Arise, the miniseries that introduces, well, Serpentor, duh. He's actually the one who created the Battle Android Troopers. In the comic, it was Dr. Mindbender. But more importantly, we learn where his loyalties truly lie.
With himself, of course.
He helps Mindbender thwart Cobra Commander's attempt to sabotage the creation of Serpentor in exchange for money. He then later helps Cobra Commander's attempt to kill Serpentor, once again in exchange for money. So his loyalty is to his wallet, which makes him pretty much a perfect Cobra. Oh, and once again, his affiliation with Destro is never brought up.
And that was Scrap Iron.
A couple of good figures and an awful one. While he wasn't used to his full potential in the comic, I think he got just about the right amount of attention in the cartoon. And though I would have liked to have seen his connection with Destro brought up, I can understand why they didn't, since he came out years before they established Destro had his own faction, the Iron Grenadiers.
On a personal note, Scrap Iron was never released here in Belgium. Well, not under the G.I.Joe banner anyway.
He was available in some regions on the old Red Action Force cards, but I never saw those. So my youth was devoid of Scrap Iron. As a result, when I was a kid, I pretended the Sea Slug figure was Scrap Iron, as I really liked the character back then. That's also why his toy was the first one I ever traded for as an adult collector. It was the first action figure I had sent over to me from America, ending up costing me like $15 or something. And it started, well, all this crap. so it'll always be special to me.
Well, see you next time, everybody.